For 25 years, Stephen believed one story, that the money he sent home was keeping his parents safe. He returned from the Navy rich enough to buy them anything. What he found instead was a rusted school bus on land that used to be theirs. His mother, his father, sleeping inside. The licensed care coordinator was real. The payments were on time. But the address had never been given. His sister Michelle made sure of that. Stephen Morgan left home at 18 with a duffel bag and a promise. 20 years in the Navy. 5 more in defense logistics. He built discipline, rebuilt his mind, and came back with more money than his parents had ever seen. Every month, he sent his allowance to a licensed care coordinator his sister Michelle had arranged. Every month, the reports said William and Nancy were fine. So Stephen kept working, kept sending, kept believing, until he stepped onto land that used to be his family's and found a rusted school bus with a generator humming outside. The question isn't just how this happened. It's who was paid to let it happen. Stephen had spent 25 years imagining home as a fixed point, a place that would not move, no matter how far he went. He was wrong. Home had been moved off its foundation, stripped of its wiring, and parked behind a line of dead pine trees on the edge of what used to be the Morgan family land. He stood in the brush near the old property line, still wearing the dark wool coat he had bought for the reunion. In his pocket were 2 things, a cashier's check for a house and a letter from the care coordinator dated 3 weeks ago, stamped with the logo of a licensed senior care agency and signed with a clean, professional signature. The letter said William was stable. It said Nancy was adjusting well. It said the facility in Asheville had recently upgraded its physical therapy wing. Stephen had read that line twice on the plane and felt something close to peace. Now that paper was in his hand, and the bus was in front of him. A repurposed school bus, pale yellow under a layer of dirt, its windows covered from the inside with sun-faded sheets and taped cardboard. A single extension cord ran from a rear window to a portable generator placed on cinder blocks. The generator was still warm. Somebody had just shut it off. Stephen did not move for a long moment. His mind tried to reconcile 2 images: the assisted living facility Michelle had described, with its garden paths and scheduled activities, and this rusted metal box sitting in the same clearing where his father once parked a tractor. He told himself it might be storage. Maybe the old property had been sold and someone was using the land. That was possible. People did strange things with inherited property. But the generator, the extension cord, the plastic water tank strapped to the side, those were not storage. Those were survival. Then the bus door swung open. Nancy Morgan appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a man's flannel shirt that swallowed her shoulders. Her gray hair was cut short, uneven, as if she had done it herself with dull scissors. She paused on the step, blinking against the weak afternoon light, and for a second, Stephen did not recognize her. The mother he remembered had thick brown hair and wide hips and a laugh that carried across the yard. This woman was thin in a way that looked painful, her cheekbones sharp, her wrists like dry branches. She shaded her eyes and looked toward the road, not toward him yet. Stephen stepped forward. His boot snapped a twig. Nancy turned, and her whole body went still. For 3 seconds, neither spoke. Then her mouth opened, and she said his name not as a question, but as a warning. Stephen, in that single word, he heard everything she had been carrying. Surprise, relief, shame, the knowledge that this moment would reveal something she had spent years trying to hide. "What is this?" he heard himself ask. Nancy did not answer right away. She pulled the flannel tighter and looked back into the bus, as if checking on someone. Then she stepped down slowly, her bare feet slipping into a pair of cracked rubber sandals left outside the door. "Your father is sleeping," she said. "Don't wake him." Stephen stared past her into the dark rectangle of the open door. He could see the edge of a mattress, a pile of folded blankets, a plastic basin, a hot plate, a life compressed into 200 square feet. "Where is the house?" he asked. Nancy reached out and touched his arm. Her fingers were cold. It's gone, baby. It's been gone. Gone, the word landed like a hush. Stephen turned in a slow circle, taking in the clearing. The old oak was still there, but beyond it, the land had been scraped flat. Tire tracks cut through the soil. A row of orange survey stakes marked off where a construction company had begun digging. The family home, the barn, the tool shed, all of it had been erased. He looked at his mother. Who did this? She shook her head. Not now. Let me wake your father. He will want to see you. She turned back toward the bus, and Stephen followed. The moment his foot touched the metal step, the smell hit him. Kerosene, used clothes, canned soup, and the faint, sweet odor of old sweat. It was the smell of poverty, the kind he had believed his family had escaped when he left. Inside, William Morgan lay on a converted bench seat that had been padded with foam and covered in a brown blanket. His body was smaller than Stephen remembered, his legs covered by a heavy quilt even though the air inside was warm. A wheelchair sat folded against the wall. On a small wooden shelf beside him, pill bottles stood in neat rows, their labels marked with black marker, morning. Evening, half no refill. Stephen knelt beside the mattress. His father's eyes opened slowly, clouded but alert. The old man blinked at him, then smiled, showing teeth yellowed and worn, but still familiar. You got tall, William whispered. Stephen laughed, but the sound broke. It's been 25 years, Dad. Couldn't tell, William said. You always had your mother's eyes. He tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled and he fell back against the pillow. Nancy moved quickly to help him, one hand behind his back, the other steadying his neck. The motion was practiced, second nature. Stephen watched them and felt the weight of every dollar he had sent. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the payment history he had never thought to question. $12,000 last year, $9,000 the year before. A total of nearly $140,000 over 7 years, all sent to a woman named Regina Bell, licensed care coordinator, contractor with a senior care agency, recommended by his sister Michelle. Where's Regina? Stephen asked. The nurse. The coordinator. Nancy froze. William turned his face toward the window. Michelle handles all that, Nancy said quietly. Handles what? The money. The papers. She said it was easier if one person managed things. Stephen stood up, his head nearly touching the roof of the bus. Mom, I sent that money for you. For Dad. Not for Michelle to manage. For care. For a roof. For food. Nancy looked at him then, and her eyes were wet. We haven't seen Michelle in 3 months. She said the assisted living place closed. She said the new one was being renovated. She said she was working on it. 3 months. The story had been changing for years, but Stephen had never been told the version his parents were living. William coughed, a deep, wet sound that filled the small space. Nancy reached for the pill organizer and held out half a tablet. Stephen watched her break it with a knife, the same way he had seen poor men on submarines split rations. That's not enough, Stephen said. Nancy did not look at him. It keeps him breathing. Stephen pulled out the second letter from the care coordinator, the one with the Asheville address. He unfolded it and read it aloud. William is stable. Nancy is adjusting well. Facility upgraded. He looked at his parents. Where is Asheville? William closed his eyes. Nancy folded her arms across her chest. Nowhere, she said. We've been here for 2 years. Stephen stepped back, his shoulder hitting the metal wall of the bus. 2 years. His father had suffered a stroke 7 years ago. The care coordinator had been employed for 6 of those years. The letter was a lie. The facility was a lie. The woman was real, but her instructions had never been followed. He looked around the bus again, seeing it with new eyes. The stack of unopened envelopes on a shelf near the door. The handwritten sign above the sink, turn off generator by 9. The cracked plastic cup holding toothbrushes. The missing door handle on the storage cabinet. And on the floor beside the wheelchair, a pile of Michelle's old letters, opened and folded and refolded, each one bearing the same return address. Stephen picked up one of the envelopes. It was from Michelle, dated 8 months ago, addressed to the assisted living facility in Asheville. Inside was not a letter. It was a single line, written in pencil on a scrap of paper. "Tell him you're fine. Don't make this harder." Stephen's jaw tensed. He looked at his mother. She was watching him with the expression of a woman who had been holding a secret so long it had become part of her. Then William spoke, his voice low and rough. "She told us you stopped sending money. She said we had to leave the house because you fell behind. She said you were in trouble, and we should be grateful she let us keep the land." Stephen stared at the scrap of paper in his hand. The truth was not in Asheville. The truth was sitting in a rusted bus, wearing his sister's handwriting, and waiting for him to believe it. Stephen did not move for what felt like a full minute. Then he crouched down beside his father and lifted the heavy quilt. William's right leg twitched, but his eyes stayed on Stephen's face. "I kept them," William whispered. "Didn't know why. Just felt wrong." Stephen turned. On the shelf near the bus door was a dented metal box, the kind fishermen use for tackle. Nancy reached for it, but Stephen touched her hand. "Let me." He carried the box outside into the thin gray light and sat on a cinder block near the generator. Nancy followed, arms crossed tight. Inside the box were envelopes, dozens of them. Some were official, with the care coordinator's return address. Others were handwritten, from Michelle. William had flattened each one and stacked them in careful order. Every envelope had been opened, not torn along the seam but sliced cleanly at one end, as if someone had used a letter opener. The contents had been removed, refolded, and slipped back inside. Stephen pulled out the first envelope. It was addressed to William and Nancy Morgan at the family home. Inside was a single sheet. At the top, the care coordinator's agency letterhead. Below that, a brief note saying the monthly allowance had been received and applied to the care plan, but the amount was missing. Someone had covered it with correction fluid and written a new number above it. $700. The original was still faint underneath, $3,000. He pulled out another. The same pattern. The amount whited out, changed. The date on the letter did not match the envelope's postmark. Stephen's hand started to shake. Nancy sat beside him on an upended bucket. "We thought maybe you were doing what you could. She said things were hard for you. She said the money got smaller because you had problems at work." Stephen looked at her. "I never reduced a single payment." He held up the envelope. "I sent $3,000 every month, sometimes more." Nancy flinched. "We thought Michelle cut the number before you ever saw it." Stephen said it quietly, but the words hit like a thrown stone. "She opened every one of these and made you believe I was failing you." Nancy's face crumpled, but she did not cry. She had no tears left for this. "She told us you had stopped paying the property tax, that the bank was moving to take the house. She said we had to leave before the sheriff came. Who told you to get in a bus?" "Michelle," Nancy said it with a flatness that hurt more than anger. "She said it was temporary. She said she had a plan. She moved us out here at night so the neighbors wouldn't see." Stephen looked back at the bus. The tires were flat. The engine had been pulled. It was not temporary. It was a prison disguised as a favor. He pulled out his phone and called Michelle. It rang 6 times, then voicemail. He did not leave a message. He called again. Same result. Then he opened his contacts and found the number for Regina Bell, the care coordinator. The woman answered on the second ring. "Bright Path Senior Care. This is Regina." Stephen gave his name and asked for a copy of his parents' latest file. There was a pause. Then Regina's voice shifted, suddenly careful. "Mr. Morgan, I sent your sister the monthly update on the 15th. Your parents are doing very well at the facility in Asheville." "What facility?" "Cedar Ridge Assisted Living." Regina said the name like it should be obvious. "Your sister arranged the transfer after the house was sold. I was told you were informed." Stephen's grip tightened on the phone. "I never approved a transfer. I never approved a sale. My parents are not in Asheville. They're sitting next to me in a bus." The silence on the line lasted 4 seconds. Then Regina spoke slowly. "Mr. Morgan, I have been sending written reports to the address your sister provided. The facility administrator's name is on file. I have never been to Cedar Ridge. Because I was told the facility does not allow outside care coordinators on site due to patient privacy. So you've never met them? I spoke with your sister every month. She said your mother was too tired for calls. Stephen looked at the bus. My mother is not too tired. She's been living without running water. Regina's breath caught. That can't be. The payments were used for the facility. I deducted my fee and forwarded the remaining balance to Cedar Ridge's billing department. The account was provided by your sister. Stephen wrote down the account number as she read it. It was not a facility account. It was a business account under the name Summit Family Medical Clinic. He ended the call and stared at the name. Summit Family Medical Clinic. Michelle's husband, Marcus, had opened that clinic 5 years earlier with a small business loan and Michelle's signature as guarantor. Stephen had never met Marcus in person, but he remembered Michelle bragging about the clinic's growth, the new diagnostic wing, the plans to expand into physical therapy. Now the clinic's account was receiving the money meant for William and Nancy. The care coordinator had been real. The reports had been real. The billing department had been a lie. Michelle had used a licensed woman with a clean record as an unknowing funnel, moving money from Stephen's account through a legitimate coordinator into her husband's failing business. Stephen sat on the cinder block, the weight of that realization pressing into his chest. He had spent 25 years building discipline, following orders, saving every dollar. He had never owned a house of his own, never bought a new car, never married, because he believed his sacrifice was protecting the people he loved. And Michelle had turned that sacrifice into payroll. He opened his laptop, which he had left in the rental car. The rental had a satellite connection, and he used it to access his financial accounts. He had not checked his investment portfolio in nearly a year. Most of it was in a private equity fund that handled defense contract residuals, a blind trust he had set up during his Navy days. He scrolled through the holdings. That was when he saw the name again. Summit Family Medical Clinic. Not as a vendor, not as a client, as a debtor. The fund he had invested in had quietly purchased a bundle of small business promissory notes, including one signed by Marcus Reed and Michelle Morgan. The note was in default. The balance was large, nearly the size of the money Michelle had stolen. And under the terms of the fund agreement, Stephen had the right to initiate foreclosure on the underlying assets of Summit Family Medical Clinic in 7 days. Stephen closed the laptop, then opened it again. He checked the date. The foreclosure window was already open. In 1 week, he could force the clinic into receivership, take control of its property, its equipment, its accounts. The thing Michelle had been stealing to save would collapse under his signature. He looked at his parents. Nancy was watching him with a fear that had nothing to do with the bus or the cold. William had pulled the quilt over his legs again, his breathing heavier from the effort of sitting up. "What did you find?" Nancy asked. Stephen did not answer at first. He was not yet sure what kind of son he was about to become. Then he said, "I found the reason Michelle never wanted me to come home." He paused. "And I found the leverage to end this." The generator coughed once and went quiet. Inside the bus, the light faded. Stephen sat in the growing dark, the laptop screen glowing like a small blue fire, and for the first time since he had left home at 18. He knew exactly what he was capable of. Stephen left the laptop open on the cinder block and walked back into the bus. Nancy had lit a small battery lantern, and the orange glow made the interior feel like the inside of a metal heart. William was awake now, sitting up with his back against a pile of worn cushions. His eyes tracked Stephen across the room. "How bad is it?" William asked. Stephen sat on the edge of the bench and showed him the screen. He pointed to the fund's holding summary, then to the note against Summit Family Medical Clinic. "Michelle and Marcus owe this fund more than they've ever paid me back. The fund is part of my retirement portfolio. I didn't know it had purchased the note until now." William studied the numbers, his lips moving silently. Then he said, "You own your sister's debt. I own a piece of it." Stephen closed the laptop. "That means I can decide what happens next." Nancy stepped forward, one hand on William's shoulder. "You're not going to hurt her, are you?" Stephen looked at his mother's face. lined with worry even now. No, Mom, I'm not going to hurt her. But I am going to stop her. He paused. I need to see her first. I need to hear her say it. Nancy and William exchanged a look. Then William nodded. Do what you have to do. Stephen drove to Michelle's house that evening. The house was a split level on a cul-de-sac, with a new SUV in the driveway and a landscaped yard that had not been watered in weeks. The lights were on inside. He parked across the street and watched for a few minutes, letting the anger settle into something more useful. He did not knock. He used the key his mother had kept hidden in the bus, the spare Michelle had given her years ago. The door opened into a hallway lined with family photos. Michelle had hung pictures of herself and Marcus, her children, her vacation trips. There was not a single photo of William or Nancy. Michelle was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. She looked up when she heard the lock turn. For a moment, her face was blank. Then she smiled. But it was the kind of smile that appears when a person is calculating whether to run or fight. Stephen, she said, you're back. I was going to call, don't. He stepped inside and closed the door. I've been to the bus. Michelle's smile faded. The bus? What bus? The school bus you put Mom and Dad in after you sold their house. She set the phone down slowly, as if it had suddenly become a weapon. They told you? Look, I can explain. The house was a burden. The taxes were behind. I had to make a decision. You told them I stopped sending money. Stephen interrupted. You told them I fell behind. You forged Dad's signature on the sale. You had the care coordinator send reports to a facility that doesn't exist. He pulled out his phone and showed her the account number Regina Bell had given him. And the money went to your husband's clinic. Michelle's face went pale. Her mouth opened, then closed. For several seconds, neither spoke. I didn't steal it, she finally said. I used it to keep the clinic alive. Marcus doesn't know. I was going to pay it back when things turned around. Things turned around 7 years ago, Michelle. Dad had a stroke. You got a licensed coordinator to cover for you. The only reason anyone believed you is that you are my sister. Stephen's voice was low, controlled. Tell me why I shouldn't call the sheriff right now. Michelle's eyes filled with tears, but she held his stare. Because I'm your family. No, Stephen said it flatly. Family doesn't leave parents in a bus without running water. Family doesn't open their letters and rewrite the amounts. Family doesn't sell the land Dad spent his life working for. He took a step closer. You want to know what family does? Family shows up. That's what I did. Michelle's shoulders sagged. She leaned against the counter, her fingers pressed to her forehead. You don't understand what it's been like. The clinic was failing. Marcus was about to lose it. I had to do something. So you took from Mom and Dad because they couldn't fight back. Stephen shook his head. That's not a reason. That's a confession. There was a long silence. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Then Stephen said, I found the note. Michelle looked up. What note? The promissory note Marcus signed for the clinic. It's held by a fund I invested in. He pulled out a copy of the document. I can foreclose in 7 days. The clinic, the equipment, the accounts, everything, it would all be liquidated. Michelle's face went white. You wouldn't. I haven't decided yet. Stephen folded the paper and put it back in his coat. But I'm not giving you time to hide anything else. Tomorrow, you're going to sit down with me, Marcus, Mom, and Dad. You're going to tell the truth. Michelle started to shake her head, but Stephen cut her off. That's not a request. He turned and walked out of the house, leaving her standing in the kitchen with her phone still lit on the counter. The night air was cold. Stephen stood on the curb for a moment, looking back at the house. He had always thought of Michelle as the responsible one. Now he realized that responsibility and control could look exactly the same from a distance. He drove back to the bus, but on the way he made one more stop at a small drive-through pharmacy. He picked up a full prescription for William's blood pressure medication and paid out of pocket. The number on the receipt was less than $300. $300. His father had been cutting tablets in half for $300. That night, Stephen slept in the rental car with the seat reclined. The bus was too cramped, and he did not want his parents to see him weep. In the morning, he retrieved the box of envelopes from the bus and laid them out again on the hood of the car. He photographed each one, front and back. Then he called the county recorder's office and asked for the recorded deed transfer. The clerk emailed him a copy within the hour. The sale price was $140,000. The county tax appraisal had listed the property at $310,000 2 years earlier. The buyer was a shell company called Pine Ridge Development LLC. The seller's signature looked like William's name, but the strokes were too smooth, too uniform. William's hands had trembled for years due to neuropathy. This signature did not tremble. Stephen searched the business registry. Pine Ridge Development LLC had been formed 6 months before the sale. Its registered agent was a notary public named Dana Whitfield. Stephen recognized the name. Dana Whitfield was one of Michelle's closest friends from college. He called Dana's office. A receptionist answered. Stephen gave a false name and said he needed to schedule a notary appointment. The receptionist said Dana would be out of town until Friday. Stephen thanked her and hung up. The pieces were moving faster now. Michelle had not just forged William's signature and used a fake buyer to launder the sale. She had used a notary friend to certify the documents. The sale was so deeply fraudulent that even if Stephen chose not to foreclose on the clinic, the criminal exposure alone would end Michelle's life as she knew it. But Stephen did not call the sheriff. He was not ready for that kind of wreckage. Instead, he drove to Summit Family Medical Clinic. The clinic occupied a low brick building near the highway with a sign that looked new but was already peeling at the corners. The parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the waiting room had 2 patients and a television playing a home improvement show. The receptionist glanced up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Marcus Reed," Stephen said. "I'm his brother-in-law." The receptionist's expression flickered with something like sympathy. "He's in the back office. Let me tell him you're here." A few minutes later, Marcus appeared. He was tall and thin, with deep circles under his eyes and a stethoscope still around his neck. He looked at Stephen with confusion. "Stephen? Michelle said you were out of the country." She lied. Stephen extended his hand. "We need to talk." They went into Marcus's office, a small room cluttered with billing statements, lab reports, and unpaid invoices. Marcus sat behind the desk and rubbed his face. "Look, if this is about the money I owe the fund, I know. I've been trying to renegotiate." "This isn't about the fund," Stephen said. "This is about my parents." Marcus blinked. "William and Nancy? They're in Asheville, right?" Michelle said they're living in a school bus on land that used to be theirs. Michelle sold the house and the property without their knowledge. She forged my father's signature. She's been taking the money I sent for their care and putting it into this clinic. Marcus's face went blank, then collapsed into disbelief. "That can't be." Michelle said the family trust was paying for the facility. She said you two had set it up. There is no family trust. Stephen leaned forward. "I've been sending money to a care coordinator named Regina Bell. Michelle told her the parents were in a facility. Regina has never seen them. She's been sending payments to this clinic's account." Marcus stared at the desk, his hands trembling. "She told me the clinic got an investment loan from a private fund. She said it was from her savings. It wasn't. It was from my parents' care allowance." Marcus covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook, and for a long moment he did not speak. Then he lowered his hands, and his eyes were wet. "I didn't know." His voice cracked. "I swear to God, I didn't know." Stephen believed him. Marcus looked like a man who had been fed a lie for years and had never thought to check the source. That was its own kind of failure, but it was not the same as Michelle's. "Do you want to fix this?" Stephen asked. Marcus looked up. "How?" "Tomorrow, I'm calling a family meeting. I need you there. No warning, no time for Michelle to prepare. You tell the truth about the clinic's finances. You tell the truth about what you knew and when. And then we talk about the note." Marcus swallowed. "The note is in default. They can foreclose." "I know," Stephen said. I control the fund. Marcus's face went still. What? The fund is part of my blind trust. I didn't realize it had purchased your note until yesterday. That means I decide whether to foreclose, restructure, or tear this place apart. Marcus looked at him as if he were seeing a ghost. You would do that for us? I would do it for my parents. Stephen stood up. And because if Michelle doesn't face consequences, she will do it again. Tomorrow, be there. He left the clinic and drove back to the bus. Nancy was outside trying to start the generator. Stephen took the cord from her hand and pulled it once. The generator coughed to life. His mother looked at him with a small, tired smile. Did you see her? She asked. Yes. What are you going to do? Stephen looked toward the scraped land beyond the tree line, where the first concrete footings for a new development were already being poured. I'm going to give her a choice, he said, and then I'm going to make sure she chooses right. At 9:45, Marcus pulled his car to the edge of the dirt road and walked the last 100 yards to the bus. He was wearing a button-down shirt that hung loose on his thin frame, and his face looked worse than it had the day before. He stopped when he saw the bus up close. The sagging door, the extension cord, the cracked rubber sandals beside the step. He turned to Stephen, but Stephen only nodded toward the open door. William was already awake, propped against the cushions. Nancy had made weak coffee on the hot plate and set out 3 mismatched cups. When Marcus stepped inside, Nancy stood and hugged him, and Marcus held on longer than Stephen expected. He whispered something to her that Stephen could not hear, but Nancy's shoulders shook once, then stilled. Michelle arrived at 10. Her SUV stopped just out of sight behind the tree line, and for a long moment, the only sound was the cough of the generator. Then she walked into the clearing. She saw the bus and stopped, her face unreadable. Come inside, Stephen said. She did not argue. She climbed the metal steps and stood in the narrow aisle, her shoes crunching against the worn linoleum. Nancy sat beside William. Marcus stood near the shelf with the metal box. Stephen closed the bus door. For a full minute, no one spoke. Then Stephen took the first envelope from the box and held it out to Michelle. Open it. Michelle looked at the envelope. Her name was not on it, but she knew what it was. She did not move. Stephen pulled out the letter inside and showed it to her. You changed the amount from 3,000 to 700. You used correction fluid. You didn't even wait for it to dry before you refolded it. Michelle's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Stephen placed the envelope on the small table. Then he reached into his coat and brought out the copy of the deed. He laid it beside the envelope. The house was sold to a company called Pine Ridge Development. The registered agent is your friend Dana Whitfield. The seller's signature is a forgery. Nancy looked at William. William's eyes were fixed on his daughter. Why did you do it? He asked. Michelle's voice came out cracked. Because the clinic was failing. Because Marcus was going to lose everything. Because I didn't want to be the one who failed. You already failed, Stephen said quietly. You failed them. Michelle's eyes filled. I was trying to save my family. Your family, Stephen repeated. You mean your husband, your house, your SUV. This family was already saved. You just needed to leave it alone. Marcus stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. I'm done lying for you. I'm done pretending we didn't see the signs. I'm done with all of it. Michelle turned to him, stunned. Marcus. She put them in a bus. Marcus pointed at William and Nancy. I didn't know that. But I knew the clinic's money was coming from somewhere I wasn't allowed to ask about. I let it happen because I wanted the clinic to survive. That's on me too. Stephen pulled out a folder from his bag and opened it on the table. Inside were printed statements, the loan note, the fund agreement, and a typed document with the title Restructuring Agreement. This is the real reason I didn't call the sheriff, Stephen said. Because I can do something worse to you, Michelle. I can make you accountable every single day. He turned the document toward her. It was dense, but the first page had a simple preamble. William Morgan would become chairman of the clinic's executive board. The board would consist of 3 members, William, Nancy, and Stephen. Every disbursement over $500 would require William's signature. Michelle's salary would be paid monthly, but only after William reviewed the clinic's accounts and signed the release. The note would be restructured, not forgiven. The foreclosure would be halted, but the fund would receive a controlling stake. Michelle stared at the paper. You want Dad to run the clinic? I want Dad to sign your paycheck. Stephen's voice was calm, final. Every month, you will sit in front of him and explain what you did with the money. The man whose house you sold. The man whose signature you forged. The father you left in a bus. He will decide if you deserve your salary. William shifted on the bench. His hands were trembling, but his eyes were clear. I'll do it, he said. Every month. Michelle started to shake her head. I can't do this. I can't face him every month. Then I'll foreclose, Stephen said. You'll lose the clinic, the house, the car, everything, and I'll still file a criminal complaint. Dana Whitfield will be named as co-conspirator. The notary board will revoke her commission. You won't just lose money, Michelle. You'll lose your name. The words hung in the small space, heavy and cold. Nancy reached for William's hand. Marcus lowered his head. Michelle's breath came in short gasps. She looked around the bus, at the pill bottles, the hot plate, the folded blankets, the envelope on the table. For the first time, she seemed to see it all as a place where her parents had actually lived. I didn't know it would get this bad, she whispered. That's not true, Stephen said. You sent them here. You knew exactly what it was. Michelle broke then, not with loud sobs, but with a quiet collapse into the nearest seat. She bent forward, her hands over her face, and cried until her shoulders ached. No one comforted her. No one stood in her way. After a long moment, William reached out and touched his daughter's arm. I don't understand you, he said slowly, but I still know you. Sign the paper, and you can keep trying to be part of this family. Refuse, and I'll watch you go. Michelle looked up at him through swollen eyes. How can you still call me family after what I did? William held her hand. Because you are my daughter, and because I'm not going to let your failure become my whole life. He paused. But I will not let you hurt your mother again. Nancy wiped her face and nodded. Michelle signed the agreement. She signed it with a pen that trembled, but she signed it. Then Marcus signed as co-owner, and Stephen signed as the fund representative. William signed last, his hand unsteady but his strokes unmistakable. The signature was real. That afternoon, Stephen drove his parents to a small house on the other side of town. It was a rental, clean and warm, with a ramp for William's wheelchair and a window that looked out over a modest garden. Stephen had signed the lease before sunrise. For the first time in 2 years, Nancy had running water. For the first time in longer than that, William did not have to cut his pills in half. But Stephen did not stop there. He filed a challenge to the property transfer with the county recorder. Backed by a handwriting expert and a sworn statement from Dana Whitfield, who had called him that morning in a panic, saying she had been misled and wanted to cooperate. The sale was frozen. The land would not be developed. The concrete footings already poured would be torn out. By the end of the week, William and Nancy were back on their land. The bus was gone. In its place, Stephen had ordered a small modular home, the kind that could be delivered and set in a day. It was not the home they had lost, but it was theirs. And then, on the last day of the month, Stephen drove his father to Summit Family Medical Clinic. William sat in his wheelchair in the clinic's back office, a ledger open in front of him. Michelle stood across the desk. Here is the salary request, she said, sliding a paper toward him. William looked at it for a long time. Then he picked up the pen and signed. He did not say a word, but his hand did not shake. When they left, Stephen pushed his father out into the parking lot. The sun was low, and the air smelled like rain. William reached up and touched Stephen's hand on the wheelchair grip. I kept the envelopes, William said, because I knew if I ever saw you again, I would need to show you the truth. Stephen looked down at him. You knew she was lying all along? I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have the strength to fight it. William paused. Until you came back. Stephen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're stronger now." William smiled faintly. Every man is stronger when he has a reason to wake up. They drove home in silence. Nancy was waiting on the porch, a cup of coffee in her hand. The new house stood where the old garage had been, its windows bright against the darkening sky. That night, Stephen opened his laptop and closed the investment account for good. He transferred the remaining balance into a trust for his parents' care. He did not want another blind fund, another hidden document, another way for family to hide from the truth. And then he saw it. One final notification from the fund manager, sent before the account closed. A note attached to the file that had never been opened. The note read, "Forged signature identified on original note. Loan application contains same notary, Dana Whitfield. Recommend review." Stephen stared at the screen for a long time. Michelle had not just forged the sale documents, she had forged the loan for the clinic too. The same notary, the same pattern. The debt she had been running from was built on another lie, one Stephen had accidentally inherited. He closed the laptop and looked toward the bedroom where his parents were sleeping. In the morning, he would decide whether to tell Marcus. But for now, he leaned back and listened to the sound of rain on the roof. The family was not fixed. It was not whole. But it was alive. And for the first time in 25 years, Stephen was home. What happened to Stephen's family was not a single crime. It was a slow, methodical rewriting of reality. Michelle did not simply take money. She took the story her parents told themselves about who was watching over them. She took the dignity of a man who had spent his life working with his hands. She took the peace of a mother who had already sacrificed too much. And she did it all by using the one thing family members rarely question, the belief that blood means protection. But here is what no one said at the time, and what Stephen learned too late to be called lucky. Betrayal is rarely loud. It does not announce itself with a broken lock or a phone call from a stranger. It arrives in clean envelopes, in professional signatures, in monthly reports that sound too good to be false. It arrives in the voice of someone who says, "I handled it." And because you want to believe them, you do. The lesson from William and Nancy Morgan is not simply that old age makes people vulnerable. It is that vulnerability is often created by the people closest to us. The care coordinator was real. The payments were real. The documents looked official. The lie lived in the space between what was reported and what was true. And only someone standing on the property could see the difference. Stephen returned from the Navy with enough money to buy his parents anything. He came home believing he had already saved them. What he discovered was that saving someone is not the same as sending money. Saving someone means showing up, asking hard questions, and refusing to look away when the answers do not make sense. Michelle was given a choice, and she chose the uncomfortable path of monthly accountability. That does not make her innocent. It does not make her forgiven. It makes her visible. In families, visibility can be the first step toward either healing or final separation. The Morgan family has not decided which one is theirs yet. The lingering question is not whether Stephen should have called the police. It is whether you would have seen the signs earlier. Would you have opened the envelopes? Would you have driven to the address on the reports instead of trusting them? Would you have believed your sibling when they said they had everything under control? If this story left you uneasy, that is the point. The most dangerous lies are not told by strangers. They are told by people who know exactly where to find your trust and exactly how to break it without a sound. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories that expose the hidden cost of family silence, subscribe now. Because the truth only protects you if you choose to see it.